Buon pomeriggio, sono Silvia Petrosillo di Macmillan Education. Sono lieta di darvi il benvenuto al nostro terzo webinar organizzato appunto da Macmillan Education insieme a Mondadori Education. Oggi abbiamo il piacere di ospitare Dave Spencer, autore di Gateway prima e seconda edizione, nonché esperto di Flipped Classroom. Il webinar prevede una presentazione di 45 minuti circa, poi seguiti da 15 minuti in cui cercheremo di rispondere alle vostre domande. Le domande possono essere poste da voi durante il webinar utilizzando l'apposito form sulla destra del vostro schermo. Inoltre vi ricordo che riceverete le attestate di partecipazione entro generalmente una settimana direttamente nella casella della vostra posta elettronica e inoltre caricheremo la registrazione di questo webinar sul canale YouTube di Mondadori Education e potrete anche poi scaricare il video nonché le slide di presentazione di Dave Spencer sempre dal sito mondadorieducation.it. Questo è tutto, direi non mi resta che augurare a tutti voi una buona visione. Dave, thanks again for joining us and it is over to you now.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. It's a very sunny but cold day here in Spain, where I live. It's great that so many people are joining us today. It's a real pleasure to give this talk for Italy. As you probably know, the webinar is recorded, so you can watch it again later. Before I really begin the talk, I'd also like to thank Macmillan Italia and also Mondadori for making this webinar possible. What I'm going to do now is I am going to switch off my camera and I'm going to show you the PowerPoint presentation. And as Sylvia said, at the end, there will be a chance for me to answer some questions that you might have. Okay, let's begin. Let me share my PowerPoint presentation with you. And as you can see, as you know, we're talking about flipping the classroom, which I think is a great use of technology in the 21st century. I'm going to give you an outline of the talk so that you know what I'm going to talk about today. We're going to begin with a simple definition of what is the flipped classroom. So if you don't know, if you've never heard of the expression before, I will be explaining very simply what it is. What I think is really important is to explain where the idea for the flipped classroom came from, because it's a very practical thing that happened in America. And I think the origin can help us to understand how and why we can incorporate the flipped classroom into our own lessons. Then I'm going to show you an example of using the flipped classroom to teach English grammar. And obviously that example will come from Gateway 2nd edition. If you haven't seen that, I'm just going to show you how we incorporate the flipped classroom into the book. Then I'll talk about general reasons and general ways that we can use the flipped classroom, because I think one of the great things about the flipped classroom approach is that there is lots of variety, lots of different ways that we can use the videos and lots of good reasons to use them. As with anything in education, there is a positive side, but there can also be a negative side. So I will talk about one or two of the possible problems that we can have also using the flipped classroom. And then finally, for the adventurous people out there, then I'm going to give you a very, very basic introduction with some ideas, very basic ideas about how you can make your own flipped classroom videos. Okay, right, let's begin at the beginning. And before we can talk about the flipped classroom, maybe we need to decide what is a traditional classroom. Now, I've put this in inverted commas, and I will go on to talk more about this definition later. But let's say that a traditional classroom is where the teacher goes into the classroom and the teacher teaches. Okay, so if you think of university lectures, then what happens there? The teacher enters the room, the teacher then explains the content of the lesson, and the students basically listen to the teacher. Maybe they take notes, for example. And then, of course, the idea is at home, the students have to do practice. That practice could be composition, it could be answering some questions, it could be preparing a debate, but the students basically are doing the practice at home. So we've got teaching in the class and practice at home. That would be a very, very basic definition of a traditional classroom. Now, it's called the flipped classroom because the idea is that that is changing. So the teaching is happening at home. And the practice is happening in class. Now, this is where the technology comes in because often the teaching will be done via a video presentation. So the idea would be, instead of the teacher explaining a point of history for 40 minutes in class, the teacher makes a video, and that means that the students can watch it at home and they get the information at home. And then that means that when they come to class the next day, that practice can happen in the classroom, and that has the advantage that the teacher can monitor and help and have more personal contact with the students because he or she is not talking to one big whole class. Now, this is an extremely basic definition, but I think it gives you the idea. When we talk about flipped classroom, we are basically saying that the teaching is happening at home and the practice is happening in the classroom. I will come back to talk about this later because this is a simplification and I want to examine it in more detail later. But for the sake of argument, we're saying that this is the basic idea of a flipped classroom. You will notice that I've said video, but also it doesn't have to be a video. It could be a text, it could be a listening. So it's not just video, although video is the most typical way of doing the flipped classroom. Now, the idea came from America, from an American high school, and it was, in fact, 2 science teachers. And you probably know that in America, it's very typical for students to do sport and to do team competitions. And in America, that is seen as normal, that you could miss a class to do a sports event. And of course, what happened with these 2 teachers is they realized that because of all of this sport, some students kept missing class. And then what happened was one of the teachers discovered a way that they could record a PowerPoint presentation like this. They could also include the teacher's voice like we're doing now, and they could even make a video too of the teacher explaining the information to the students. And then they made this presentation available online. Now, that meant that the students who missed class, the teachers would tell them to simply watch that video later at home, whenever they could. And that meant that they didn't miss the class. So as it says here, they found that the absent students did in fact enjoy watching these lessons. Now, the interesting thing that happened next is that, in fact, even the students who were in the class, who were actually there listening to the teacher explaining, then they also asked to watch these videos, and then they watched them again later at home. Now, I'll come back to this later, but both of my son and my daughter are both studying in university in the UK. And in fact, now, just so that you know, in the UK, every single university lecture is recorded. And that means that the students can go back and watch those videos later at home in their own time. And of course, my daughter, my son, everybody generally finds this really useful. So this is what happened. They devised these videos, they made them available to the people who missed class, and then other people wanted to see them too. Another thing, which I think is really interesting and really important, is that students wanted to watch these videos also to prepare for exams. Okay, we'll come back to this later, but I think that's a very practical way of using flipped classroom videos. Now, as I said before, this presentation is being recorded, so you can look at this later, but I will be giving you some homework, okay? Your homework is further reading. if you're interested in knowing more about how the flipped classroom started, and if you're interested in seeing how the people who created it have developed it further, then these two books are both extremely interesting. The names to remember basically are Bergman and Sams, and they are the people who came up with this idea, and they've produced lots of books about it. They actually have quite an extreme view of using the flipped classroom, which I maybe don't particularly agree with, but the basic idea is there in those two books. Particularly the first book is useful to know how they went about creating their first videos. Now, we heard about this idea when at exactly the same time that I was writing Gateway 2nd edition. And we thought that it was a great idea, and we thought it was a great idea so that we could include them in the book. And what we have in Gateway 2nd edition, if you don't use Gateway, just to explain, we have short presentations, okay, by me. They are usually 3 to 6 minutes. That is deliberate because often a student's attention, traditionally on YouTube, after 6 minutes, people lose interest. So they are short grammar presentations. They are completely integrated into the book so that they connect with the reading text or possibly the listening text in the unit. And they are totally integrated. And the students can find these and use them at home by looking at the resource center or the digital students book. Now, I'm going to show you an example of how we included the flipped classroom. And this example is from a very low level, okay? This is Gateway 2nd edition A1+, okay? So we're at a simple elementary level. We have a reading text about school holidays. And I think you will agree that for us teachers, the question that is the title of that text is pretty stupid. Are long school holidays bad for you? I think that most teachers would agree that long school holidays are never bad for you. Exactly the opposite. But that's the question. Are school holidays bad for you? And we have different short texts from a blog. In those texts, we have lots of examples of prepositions of time. Okay, and so the students read the grammar in context, they turn over the page, and they have a page of grammar and it's prepositions of time. They immediately see this yellow section, which tells them that there is a flipped classroom video that they can watch for this grammar point. Now, what the grammar video does is to put the grammar again into context. We're going to watch the video now. If for some reason the video was not easy to see or hear, don't worry, because we said that these videos will later be available. You can watch the whole thing again and you should be able to see it perfectly. Within the video, I ask some questions. The questions are low-level questions for the students, but go on, why don't you try and answer the questions yourself? You can either write them down or you can shout at your computer and tell me what the answer is. And maybe from Spain, I can hear you, okay? Let's watch this video presenting prepositions of time for A1+ students.
Hi, welcome to the last Gateway A1+ flipped classroom video. In Unit 10, you read some blog posts about the summer holidays. Miguel posted his first message on July the 17th at 5:15 p.m. Look at the two prepositions here. On and at are prepositions of time. They tell us when something happens. Let's look at different prepositions of time and rules about when to use them. Here, July the 17th is the date. We use on with dates. So we say, posted on July the 17th. We also use on with days. So we say, on Friday, we're going to the beach. We use at with times. So we say, posted at 5:15 p.m. We also use at with the words night and the weekend. So we say, it's cold at night. Or, I'm going out at the weekend. We use the preposition in with months. So we say, in August, I'm going to study English. We also use in with years. So we say, in 2015, I went to Portugal. We use in with parts of the day. So we say, in the afternoons, I'm going to work. And finally, we use in with seasons. For example, we say, in the winter, it's cold. So what prepositions do we need in each of these examples? We need on because we use on with days. Which preposition do we need here? We need in because we use in with months. But which preposition do we need now? We need on because we use on with dates. Do you remember? What do we need with the morning? We need in because we use in with parts of the day. And finally, which preposition do we need here? We need at because we use at with times. In fact, something very, very important is going to happen at 10 o'clock on Saturday, the 1st of July. Do you know what it is? I'm going to go to the beach to start my holidays. Yippee! Thanks for watching the A1 Plus Flipped Classroom videos. Have a great holiday and see you again soon.
Okay, I hope you could see that nice and clearly, and I hope that you could hear that. So that's one of the examples of the videos. Obviously, we have levels A1 plus to B2 plus, and so the nature of the videos changes according to the age and the level of the students. But many of these videos share the same features, which I think are important. One is contextualization. I think personally, as a teacher of English, the important thing is that we teach grammar and vocabulary in context. And the important thing is that the students can see the language being used in a natural context, as in this example. The other thing, and I think this is a great benefit of a video instead of using a blackboard or even a whiteboard, is that it's very easy to highlight the form and the structure of the grammar using these videos, because we can make things suddenly appear, pop out, we can underline them, and we can also use color coding. So we can use the same color to highlight, for example, the present participle, the verb to be, and it means that the structure is very, very clear. Now, we can do things like underlining on the blackboard or on the whiteboard, and we can use a couple of different colors, but really the videos make this much easier. And I think that visual elements are always very useful for getting students to understand and see grammar clearly. Also, as in this video, we've got interactive questions for the students so that they don't fall asleep, so that they realize that they are going to be asked questions, and so they are involved in the videos. We also have concept questions to help them to understand the grammar, to check that they've understood. And we can also have timelines. So I think many of you know how to use timelines to show the difference between, for example, the past simple and the past continuous. We can do a single line, or we can do a wavy line. And this is, again, just a simple thing that we can include in these videos. So all of those features can help the students to understand the grammar better, and it makes it very, very clear to them. Also, one thing that's very, very important is that each video has a task sheet like this sheet. Now, the task sheet has two main objectives. One is to help the students to understand more, but a very important objective is also to check that the students have watched the videos. One thing that always worries teachers about the flipped classroom is that if the students do them at homework, how do we know that they actually watched the video? The idea of the task sheet is to check whether they watch the video or not, because there are some questions that they can only answer if they've watched the video until the end. Now, we will talk about this again at the end, because it is a worry that many teachers have about the flipped classroom. But basically, this task sheet is trying to help to solve that problem. Now, I personally like the idea of the flipped classroom because there are lots of different ways to use them, not just one way. So the first thing that we can do is to use them as Bergman and Sam's, their original idea of the flipped classroom. So the students watch them at home, they do this as part of their homework. That means that the next class, the teacher can save time because we can immediately start to do practice. So we save a little bit of time in our next lesson. Secondly, we can do, again, as we saw with Bergman and Sam's, we can also make sure that the students who miss class watch the video at home. Now, I teach here in Madrid, in Spain. I have classes usually of 18 students, so it's not too many. But of my 18 students, most days, 1 or 2 students could be missing because they're ill, they've gone to the dentist, or something has happened to them. Now, the great thing is that when a student misses a class, I can simply say to them, don't worry, you missed the presentation of prepositions of time, but I want you to watch the video at home and to do the task sheet, and that way they are not going to miss my class. So I think that's a great use of technology because you're simply helping those students who otherwise would have no access to your lesson. You can also use them as backup for your presentation. Now, this is what I said about university in the UK. You imagine that you watch the lesson. Whenever students watch any lesson, they will understand maybe a lot of it, but maybe they don't understand everything. They can ask you a couple of questions and you can re-present the grammar once or twice, but you can't keep on presenting until every single student in your class has understood. With these videos, you can teach the grammar as you always do, but you can also make the students realize that they can watch these videos whenever they need if they want to clarify your presentation, if they think they need extra help. And I think this is a very practical help. Not everybody will do this, and not everybody will need to do it. But the point is that we're making it possible for those students who do need the help. There is evidence from a survey of university students in the US. You don't need to read all of this, but the sections in red are important. It says students in the bottom third of the class performed 7 points better than their counterparts in a traditional classroom. And it says the section in red, the second section, students reported preferring the flipped classroom model because they had access to lectures online and could replay sections they did not understand. I think that, for me, is fundamental. And I know that my daughter, my son use these at university precisely for this reason. There's something that they didn't quite get, but now they have the access to the videos, which helps them to clarify. I wanted to make one point here as well. This is slightly off the subject of the flipped classroom, but I think mixed ability is one of the biggest problems that secondary school teachers have. I don't know if you would agree with me, but there are always students who are better or weaker than other students in the class. And because I am aware of this problem in the classroom, in Gateway 2nd edition, in the workbook, we have Grammar Challenge. That means that the good students who could possibly get bored, we push them and challenge them to think a little bit harder and give them exercises to keep them busy. Because sometimes the best students are the ones who get most bored and can cause most problems. Also, in Gateway 2nd edition, online, we have extra grammar practice, and it's important that we have it at 2 different levels. So we have a revision sheet for the weaker students who have problems, and we have an extension sheet for the students who are finding it easy. And I really do think that in terms of the secondary school classroom, more things that we can do to solve mixed ability is going to make our lives and our students' lives much easier. So all of that material is available to the students or to you, the teacher. Now, another way that we can use these videos, and this is possibly the way that I use them most, is you can use them as revision in class or at home before a test or an exam. So usually in class, at the end of the term, you have an exam and you don't have time to present all of that grammar again, because there are not enough lessons, not enough hours of English. Now, with these videos, you have the possibility of telling your students, okay, you've got a test next week. I want you to watch the videos again to help you to remember the grammar. So I think this is really helpful as well. You can also show them in class. And I know that the feedback that we've had for Gateway is that, in fact, a lot of teachers prefer to use these videos in class. That means that instead of presenting the grammar yourself every lesson, you can decide that, okay, for this unit, I'm not going to present the grammar. I'm going to use the video to present the grammar. And I think the big problem again for teachers is that we need variety. We always do similar things in a similar way, and it's always nice to have the option of variety. And that's what I think these videos give us. They also give your students listening practice because they can listen to a different accent. They can listen to me and my beautiful Liverpool accent, or you could use them as part of a test, teach, test approach. That means the way that we teach in grammar in Gateway is we give them some sentences from the context and we get the students to work out the rules themselves. So they have to think to be able to answer these rules for the present perfect, for example. So what we can do is we can get the students to try to work out the rules. That's the testing part. Then we say, watch the video. And that is the teaching part. And they can check their answers. If they're right, great. If they're wrong, then they have the chance to realize with my explanation how they need to answer these questions. And then the next testing part is the grammar practice activities that come next. So again, this is giving us a different way of presenting grammar in the classroom. Now, if you are a new teacher, if you've just started teaching English, there might be some grammar points that you don't feel very confident about teaching yet. What you can do is you could simply watch a video like this and you can see if it gives you ideas about how to present, for example, the difference between so and such. Particularly at higher levels like B2, B2+, there might be things that you don't enjoy teaching and that you might find that by watching the video, it inspires you to teach it in a different way. And finally, and I think this is particularly useful for lower levels, is that sometimes we teach grammar in the student's own language. So in your case, you might teach grammar in Italian. I might teach grammar at a low level in Spanish. And I think that's fine. It can help to clarify things. But what you might want to do is to use these videos as a gentle introduction to grammar presentations in English, so that even some of the language that we typically use to talk about grammar, like the present participle, the past participle, the gerund, all of those things, we can start teaching them in a non-threatening way by using the videos. So lots of different ways of using the videos, and that's why I like them, because there is flexibility with these videos. The one thing that I would say, my piece of advice, is that even if you want to do them in the way of the flipped classroom, with the students doing them for homework, I would always at the beginning of the year do the very first video together with the whole class using the task sheet, and that way the students know what the videos are like, how they are prepared, and how they are meant to use them. So that would be my piece of advice, is the first one, do it in class together, and that way the students will be able to see how we should use them. There are different reasons for using them. I'm sure you can think of lots of other reasons. The first idea is that it gives students time to practice and communicate in class. So because there's less teaching in class, there is more time for practice. That means also that there is whole class time. The teacher has more time to give personalized attention to the students. It allows the students to learn at their own speed. We talked about mixed ability. The great thing here is that the students who are maybe a bit slower can watch these as many times as they like, and that gives them the chance of learning at their own speed. It also encourages autonomy. So some students will decide to use them, some students will not use them, but the students who do use them will decide when they watch them, how they watch them, if they answer the questions, if they do the task sheets, but they are taking their own decisions about their own learning. And it's starting to encourage them to become more autonomous. And finally, I think it does offer students another presentation style and another voice. It's like having two teachers instead of one. Now, this all sounds very good, and I'm sure some of you are thinking yes, and you're thinking of particular problems. And of course, remember that you can ask me questions at the end, or you can start writing your questions on a document now. But I'm going to show you some of the most typical problems that people say to me. The first thing that I would say is that I would probably disagree with my own definition of the traditional classroom, or at least I would say that the traditional English classroom is not the same as the traditional history classroom or the traditional geography classroom. Because I said before that the students listen to the teacher teaching for the whole of the lesson, and then they do practice at home. And I think that probably all of us as English teachers would say, well, I do not spend that much time presenting. I think that an English classroom is more like this, and I don't know if you would agree with me. What happens, I think, in my classes is that I instruct, I teach, I present, for example, some grammar, but I do it, for example, for 5 or 10 minutes. Then the students practice in the classroom. They don't just practice at home, they practice in the classroom already. At that stage, I'm already monitoring them, I'm listening to them, I'm trying to help them and correct them. When we've done some practice, maybe I will present something new. Maybe it will be some vocabulary. Maybe it will be, I will present how to write an informal email. And then again, once I finish that presentation, the students will do some practice again. So I think that means that I don't think we can save as much time as if I was teaching history or science, because I think English classes are already very concentrated on student practice. I think if they aren't, they should be. Okay, so I would say that although we can save time with the flipped classroom, I would agree that we don't save that much time, because as we've seen, the presentation will only last 5 minutes, 6 minutes, not much more. Another thing, what if students don't watch the video for homework? Well, I said before that we have a task sheet and that can help. But I suppose the question would be for you, what do you do if your students don't do any homework? If your students never do homework, of course, it's quite possible that they will not watch the videos for homework. There is an argument that will say that they will watch the videos because hopefully they will find them very useful. They will realize that it makes learning easier, and so they will want to watch them. The other thing you have probably seen at the end of my video, I always do something a little bit strange, a little bit funny, and the idea is that the videos should be a little bit entertaining. So I would hope that a lot of my students will want to watch the videos because they enjoy watching them. But basically, there's no easy solution for teenage students not doing homework. If your students never do homework now, then they probably won't watch the videos. I am not going to lie. I think that that is the case. Hopefully they will want to watch them, and hopefully you can persuade them and make them see that they're actually very useful and enjoyable. What if your grammar explanation is different from mine? Well, I think that that's not really a problem. The way that you explain grammar is maybe not exactly the same as in the book anyway, but I think that the more different types of explanation we give our students, that's better, because maybe they understand one explanation and not the other. One thing to remember with the gateway videos is that the grammar explanation is exactly the same as the grammar explanation in the book. Now, you could find a grammar video on YouTube. The problem there might be that the explanation is very different from the explanation in your textbook. But generally, I don't think that this is a problem. I think it just means that the students are getting two for the price of one. They're getting two different types of explanation. And you might be thinking, yes, well, I like your video, but I want to make my own videos so that I can make them 100% relevant to the individuals in my class. And that's what we're going to look at now in the last 10 minutes of this video. One thing I will say is this is a brief introduction. At the end, again, I will give you a reference to a very useful article, which is online for people who want to investigate more. I would say that if you want to make your own flipped classroom videos, it's much easier if you are a big fan of technology and if you enjoy technology. But I will share a source so that you can find out where you can find out more about the technology that you need. Okay, now the basic ways that you could make a flipped classroom, I would say that the easiest way is the way that in fact Bergman and Sams did their very first videos, which is that you could simply video a class. Okay, so this year, for example, tomorrow or Monday, when you go into class to teach the present perfect, you could film yourself and then you could use that video to teach other students other years, or you could get your same students to watch that video at home at a later date. That's the easiest way of making a flipped classroom video. Another thing that you can do is simply at home, for example, you could film yourself giving your grammar explanation to the camera. So you could simply look at the camera and explain whatever you want to teach to your students. Now, if you are filming yourself teaching, there are some things that I think are very important to point out. The first thing is that in a classroom, sound is very, very difficult to get right. Maybe even in a webinar like this, sound is always the problem. If the sound is not good enough, the students will not be able to understand your explanations. And classrooms are often very noisy places. So do think about microphones, think about how you're going to get the sound recorded well, because a video with bad sound is going to be very difficult to follow. One thing that is very, very important, this depends on different countries, but I imagine Italy is the same as Spain, is that you are usually in Spain, you would not be allowed to record or to film students who are under 18 without permission. Okay, I made some videos for Gateway a long time ago showing some showing some grammar games and some vocabulary games. All of those students always have to give you written permission. The parents have to give you written permission. So be careful about that. That's worth remembering. The other thing is light. Again, classrooms often have very bad visibility because the sun is shining on your board. Blackboards are not very clear sometimes with the light. Maybe it's too dark. So think about the necessary light that you have. There is nothing worse than making a video where everything is perfect except for the fact that nobody can see the blackboard, for example. And remember, if you're doing a grammar presentation, think about visual aids that you can use to make the grammar clearer. So think about color coding, think about any picture. Other things that you can do, the last one, this is the one that needs technology, okay? There are some screencasting tools that you can use. So what you can do is you can make a PowerPoint presentation and you can even film yourself and you can film the sound, and that would be perfect professional quality. Okay, now there is a program which you can use to do this. If you want, write down the name, Screencast-O-Matic. I will show you what the screen looks like, what this website looks like. This has nothing to do with me, by the way. This is an outside link. It has nothing to do with Macmillan or Gateway, but just this is one example of a program that helps you to make your own videos.
Hi, Dave. Sorry to interrupt your webinar. It's just that we cannot see you. You probably need to activate your camera, I think.
Hello. I'm hoping that you can hear me and probably even see me. And I've got no way of knowing until I get a message. I don't know if that's happening or not. I'm really sorry. This is like we were almost at the end, and we really are at the question moment. And it was, I don't know, suddenly the camera has left. Maybe it was such a long time speaking. I hope that you're still there, some of you. I'm really, really sorry. By the way, you could hear my voice saying the same question again and again, but it was some sort of echo. Maybe I think I had this open on different pages. What I'm going to do, if you're still there, I'm going to, because that slide was really showing the different ways that you can find out more about making your own videos. And really, that was the end of the talk. And then I was going to look at your questions. I'm going to open a document that I have here, which I hope I can see some of the questions that you've asked, and I'll see if I can answer them. Actually, the first question that I can see is a great question. It's actually a very good question. Will the video replace teachers in the future, in my opinion? And the answer is definitely not. I think that this is a great tool for a teacher to use. I think students find videos useful to watch again, but I think that if you asked any student, they would still prefer face-to-face tuition. I think a teacher can react. A teacher can also show that they care about their students. And a video is good for giving the information, but it's not very good for all of the other things that teachers do. So I would say definitely not. I think video will continue to be an important part of education in the future, but it certainly will not replace teachers. There's a question here, which again is a great question. What if parents complain that you haven't explained anything since you had them watch a video? I would agree again. And in fact, for me, I don't know if you agree, but I think the thing about teaching is not having an extreme. I think it's using common sense. So what I think most people would do, and what I do with the flipped classroom, is, as I said before, I would have some variety. So from time to time, I would teach the class myself, and then from time to time, I will use a video. But I certainly wouldn't use a video all of the time, and I wouldn't use it for all of my presentations. So I think it's useful in terms of variety, but I wouldn't do it all the time. One thing that you might find if you read those books by Bergman and Sams is they have quite an extreme idea of the flipped classroom, where they believe that it would help all students to become totally autonomous and each student will learn at their own speed. Personally, I think that in my situation here, that would not work. I think students and parents expect a teacher to teach. And I think, as I said before, the videos are an extra to your lessons, but they do not replace you as the teacher. Somebody's asked, can a student with learning difficulties get benefit from this didactic approach through the flipped classroom? Yes, I think in the same way that it's helping with mixed ability, I think that having something recorded takes away some of the stress that students might feel, because the students don't depend on one single presentation. They don't panic because they know that they can watch these videos again. So I think in that sense, the students should be able to have extra help, and I think it could. If you were teaching, for example, dyslexic students, maybe you would need to prepare your videos in a particular way that helped those students. And this is where the important thing would be that if you had a particular student with a particular problem, you might need to invent a particular type of video. Somebody's asking about ages, and I think this is a very good question. Somebody's asking about middle school, 12 to 14. I think from the age of 12 upwards, these videos are very easy to use. I would say, and somebody I think has asked this question about primary, I think that it's difficult to I'm not an expert in primary. I think that maybe the dynamic is slightly different in primary because obviously the presentation mode will have to be different. If we're teaching grammar, the way that we present grammar is not the same for primary students. Yes, that's right. Somebody has asked about 6 to 10 years old. I would say that those are different type of presentation, and maybe again the independence of students. Students are not so independent. Maybe they wouldn't watch them. It is true that there are different types of flipped classroom videos too, so it's not always just grammar, and a flipped classroom could include even asking the students to listen to a song and to watch a video with, for example, a little story, and that could also be used as preparation for your class the next day. So I think that we've got different ways of using them, and it will certainly change according to the age of the students that we have. Somebody's asking, why is the use of flipped classroom better than the classic one? I hope I've explained already that I personally don't think it is. And I don't think even for me that the flipped classroom is necessarily a method. A method sounds like it's the way that you're teaching all of your lessons. And as I said before, I see these videos as being useful more as a complementary element of your lessons. And I would say one thing, the way that I see these videos is that I have been writing books now for Macmillan for 30 years. If somebody told me 30 years ago that a textbook would include videos where the teacher, the author of the book, actually explains the grammar, I would have thought that that was almost like science fiction. And that's really what we've done. But it doesn't really mean that the whole way of our teaching, for me, in my opinion, it doesn't mean that the way that we teach is going to change. It's simply adding on a new element that we didn't have before. When teachers used videos before, they tended to be videos of stories, videos, for example, from the BBC, but they weren't instructional videos. And I think that this is an interesting additional element to our lessons. So I would definitely, personally, I would not say that we're going to change radically the way that we teach. Okay, I think I've answered most of the questions. Somebody's asking if their students will be shocked by doing a flipped classroom lesson at the end of the year. No, I think it's a great time. Try it out. As I said, I would use the video in class first. In fact, if you go to the Macmillan website, you might be able to have access to one of these videos, and you could try out one of these gateway videos with your students. And I think that would be a great idea, because if you present this idea at the end of the year, you can see if you like it to do it next year. Certainly the idea of shocking your students, I think we need to introduce these things carefully, slowly, and again, not necessarily give the idea that this is going to be the only way that we're going to teach from now on. So I hope I've explained. My idea there is not that they would be doing a radical different way of teaching, okay? We're simply adding on a new element that didn't really exist before. I think I have finished. I really apologize. It's such a shame that we were going so well. This is what happens with technology. This is why technology will not replace teachers or the blackboard or the course book, because the course book, the blackboard, and the teacher are the most essential things that never stop working. Thank you very, very much for coming and attending this talk. I apologize again for any problems with the technical side. I know that there have been a lot of people following today. I'm really, really pleased that you managed to find the time, and I hope you found some of this useful. Okay, I'm going to switch off my camera and my microphone, and I'll be handing over to the kind people over there in Milan at Mondadori Macmillan. Okay, thank you very much for your time and your attention. And I hope you stay in touch via the Facebook page for Gateway, okay? If you're on Facebook, please have a look at that page, Macmillan Gateway. And if you have any more questions, you can ask me about those via the Facebook page. And it would be a pleasure to keep in touch. Thank you very much. Ciao.